Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hey listeners, thanks for checking out this episode today with Julie Broad. Julie, originally from British Columbia, Canada, based in Las Vegas, Nevada, now is the founder of Book Launchers, a full suite publishing marketing company for those of us in a space where a certain level of domain expertise needs to turn into a book. What an awesome conversation. If you've ever thought about writing a book to promote your business, to grow a business, or even just know that the story you're sharing with the world needs refinement around who your audience is and what it is that you're actually trying to do, I think this episode is for you. I learned a ton. It was a fun conversation. I got a lot out of it personally, and really appreciate Julie's time. Enjoy the episode. Julie Broad, welcome to Leading with Curiosity.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You know, when we were talking before we hit record here, we were getting into what it is that brought us together on this episode. For me, I have a feeling, you know, my wife might come home later today and she'll walk in the door and I'm going to say, guess what, honey? The day has finally come. Like, I'm starting the book because Julie convinced me, you know, because I just gained so much from it. So Julie Broad is we're going to explore using the writing of a book to help promote a business, an idea to build a business around, credibility in the marketplace. I'm really excited about where it's going to go. Why don't we start with a simple question, like, what is Book Launchers all about?
Yeah, so I started Book Launchers 5 years ago, actually, to help people grow or write a book that will grow their brand, grow their business. And the reason was because I had self-published 2 books. And I found knowing who to hire and in what order was quite challenging. And how do you know who's good and all the pieces? But B, and even more importantly, was nobody was thinking about marketing until I got to the very end and I hired a PR company. And then they're thinking about marketing.
Oh, wow.
But what you need is somebody who right from the very beginning goes, okay, what are you trying to do with this book? And how are we going to sell it when you're done? And positions the book at every step. And that's why I created Book Launchers. We are full service and we start with marketing in mind right from the very beginning. And then at the very end, we have a team that will be alongside you, helping you pitch you to media, speaking engagements, live appearances, running ads, getting bookstores and libraries and all the full thing. So everything a traditional publisher would do and then some, but you keep all rights and royalties.
Wow. And a team of how many? You told me just before we jumped on here.
Yeah, there's 73 people on my team. 15 are full-time, 16 are full-time employees, and the rest are contractors that we keep very busy.
Yeah. I'm hearing this idea of kind of a Simon Sinek approach of like, why are you doing this? And starting with, what do you even want to use it for? Where I imagine some people with an idea or this dream of writing a book, put their head down and just start writing. And then you might end up with this thing that you might be proud of, but it might not serve you how you meant it to. Is that how am I doing tracking your process?
Yeah, that's exactly it. A lot of people write good books and then wonder why they don't sell. And then conversely, they also write a book, whether it's good or not, doesn't even matter because it doesn't help them get to where they thought the book would help them go. Right. And there's lots of problems with it. But, you know, if you've got a traditional book deal, the only reason you got that deal is because they can see from the very beginning clearly how they're going to sell 5, 10, 20, 30,000 copies of your book. A lot of authors who end up self-publishing, they just write the book and they even go so far as to load it onto Amazon. And then they go, okay, how am I going to find readers? But
right.
that boat's like almost sailed. There's some things you can do, but a lot of it you needed to do well before your book was out there.
Wow. And I am in Vancouver, Canada. Your family, a lot based very close to me in Nanaimo, BC. You're based now, though, in Las Vegas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just tell us a little bit more about like when someone comes to you, what happens?
Yeah, the first, I mean, there's a whole application process because again, we aren't the kind of company that we would help everybody, just because we are so full service and high
Mhm.
touch, and we're very focused on that end goal. So we want to make sure that we work with people who are a good fit. So there's an application process, but at some point you talk to myself or somebody on my team, and we basically go like, hey, that's great. You want to write a book? Now tell me what success look like to you? What's going to happen after this book comes out? And you can answer if you want to take it down the path of your book, or we can just kind of go from there. But that is the starting point, is really understanding what success looks like for you once that book is done and out in the world.
Well, with your permission, that might be a really useful example, a peek behind the curtain for listeners about what I'm up to and what I'm trying to position in a way that is meaningful, like how it might resonate for them. So,
Yep.
right. Okay. So what would success look like, right? I sense in the leadership development space, in the executive coaching space, credibility is almost everything to get that process started. The next step is delivering on expectations to a client, right? But what is that? A book that would allow my signature presence, my unique abilities, all the infinite things in my life that have brought me to this place, the influences that I have, the way I view the world of leadership development in 2022, for that to be credible and unique. That's that someone would read it then, and what does success look like? That a potential client reads it and says, we need to get Nate to work with us.
Great. So then my next question is always, okay, tell me about that ideal client. Who are they?
The ideal client is somebody in a position to make these decisions, that is looking out for leadership development of the company that they own, or they're in a leadership capacity where developing leaders in the organization is, that if their leaders are developing their capacity, their lives are easier. I think that's the person that I would want to read this book.
And so the unique kind of problem, or it doesn't even have to be unique, but the problem that your book would solve for somebody. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And if you don't know, and so, I mean, I'll feed this to the readers or to the listeners too.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, so because sometimes these questions are like, whoa, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Then I often just say, okay, well, think about, what's the thing most people refer to you most? Like, you've worked with somebody and now other people are saying, hey, listen, you got to work with Nate because this is what he did for me. And you start to hear that more and more, then what is that thing that you're getting referrals for? Or what is that thing that people are saying, hey, this is the person you need to talk to about that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the impact that I had on a successful engagement, what is it
Exactly.
that I did? Oh, I like that. Okay. Right. Okay. Gotcha. So for me, it's something in the space that, leadership development can be learned. It can be tactical. It can be executed on. It's not just the way someone was born or the influences that they had. Breaking down those barriers of what is executive coaching all about? Is it right for me? Is that some kind of crazy life coaching thing that I read about in the Inquirer, or is that something that can change the way that I lead forever? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, then it starts to dive into, you have to go a little more granular, but we start to then figure out, okay, so then when this is their first outcome, what's now the secondary outcome of that? Because that's really what we're going to market at the end of this. We're not going to market the piece is like, okay, now they get that this coaching is beneficial and that this has helped them. It's like, okay, what happened after they got to that outcome? And that's the outcome of the outcome. And that's really the through line. When we also layer in some author branding and positioning, because we also want to find out this unique spin that makes you, and that will help you kind of stand out in the market. And it can be simple things, like it can be, a love of, I see a guitar. So it can be like the guitar executive coach, like the musical application of all of this, it can be just but it's that personal story and that personal spin that you want to find to help make this whole outcome of the outcome stand out and give you something interesting that people are going to want to talk about and remember you by, and all of those things. So there's like an author branding piece that we want to layer in to this outcome of the outcome that you have to kind of figure out.
Yeah, the outcome of the outcome plus the unique something about the author.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like my book, my latest one that I put out, it's called Self-Publish and Succeed. And there's lots of books on writing, but what makes us a little bit different, and my whole focus, there's kind of two big things that make us a
Yeah.
little different. One is that we're really against boring books.
Yeah.
Because a lot of nonfiction is stuff that you feel like I have to read this to get that information. I really want the information, but it's a slog to get through the book. But the
Yeah.
other piece is this marketing focus, right? A lot of great providers like editors and book cover designers and people aren't thinking about your end goal. And so what this book does is it takes all of the process, which is very similar. The reality in every industry is the process that works, that's fundamental, is pretty much the same for most. But in that, the unique layer is this marketing focus and making your book something people want to read.
Right. For the listeners and for you, can you just tell them your title again and where they could find that if they're already catching, if we are catching their attention?
Yeah, for sure. Self-Publish and Succeed is the title, and it is everywhere.
As it should be.
Exactly.
If Book Launchers has done their job, it should
Exactly.
be easy to find, right? That is great context. I would love now to maybe just step back from me. I appreciate that to kind of get this conversation going. I love this idea. You posed the question whether the difference now between having a book and a degree. As a person developing mastery or expertise in a field, what does a book do for somebody?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I often point to is in most industries, everybody has the same credentials. And then you're competing on years of experience or number of clients, or, if you're a financial planner, it's like, well, we manage $50 million, right? Like but everybody's trying to compete on that one number. When you become an author, you're now the author of the book on this subject. And that's also why it's really important to hone in on that outcome of the outcome and really be someone who solves a specific problem for a specific audience. Because now you've basically just put with neon lights, like what you are an expert in, and your degrees and your years of experience or dollars managed, that doesn't matter anymore. And then you look at, when you want to speak on stages, or you want to, if you get on media, what is the credential that goes across the bottom of the screen? It's, if you have a book, it's always author of the book. And when you're speaking, especially if you're moving into paid speaking engagements, the criteria isn't have you written a book? The criteria is what books have you written? The expectation is that you've written a book. So there's this worldly, like, I don't know what you want to call it, like bar that you just jump over when you write a book.
Right. Speaking is also a great way, hand in hand with this, to gain that credibility. Tell us a little bit about that process of the state of that industry, maybe, and a bit more about the relationship with that and being an author. Like, if you think about some of your clients for whom this has worked out really well, what's that correlation?
Yeah, it's interesting. We just had a big session recently where one of our authors who had just left a corporate job, and to hear her talk about what she's achieved in the last 18 months, people were like, "Oh, how long ago did you start this?" And they were gobsmacked that she was getting she was getting paid $5,000 to $8,000 per speaking gig. And she was doing quite a few corporate gigs, and everybody was surprised, but she said, well, it was the book. She said, and I started speaking before the book was out, but the process of refining what my message was, like, she had to go through to write the book. She said that helped me create the pitches that put me on the stages. And then once my book was out, it now became a negotiation tool. It opened the doors to some other gigs, but it was also a negotiation tool, because it was like, oh, you want to pay me $5,000 or you want to pay me $8,000 with books. And she said a lot of people start taking the 8,000 because putting a physical book in the hands of everybody in their audience or in their company was a really great tool to then further implement her message and help get the training that she was providing, more implementation and more engagement around the whole subject. So, it depends where you are in the process. If you've never spoken before, it's not like your book comes out and instantly you're a speaker. There's still some steps. You still want to have smaller engagements. You want to get it recorded. You want to create a speaker's reel, but it is a door opener that is not always available to you before you have a book.
So if we could just build a couple layers back on here now. So I've joined forces with book launchers. You've helped me create the book that I need to create, not the one that was on my mind when I started typing that first day, right? And now it is that credibility builder in the media. It is the driver to credibility in speaking engagements. And then that is a revenue stream in itself, and the domain expertise credibility as well. So the whole brand is starting to come together. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, like I said, it's not one thing for anybody. It's part of this whole ecosystem that you're creating. And the book, in many ways, for a lot of people, is a great starting point because it's hard work to think through how you're going to explain things in a way that position you well and that will really engage that reader and that ideal person. So that book can be a really great foundational element. It can also be something that's like gas on the fire of something that's already working. So there's not. I never say, oh, this is the only way, because there's lots of ways to approach it. But if you are somebody who can do speaking and wants to add that in, and you can do media and you want to add that in, you create this really powerful engine that you create that feeling of you're everywhere. And this is actually where I was at in Canada before I switched from a real estate training and education company and real estate investing into book launchers. I was always hearing from people, oh my goodness, I see you everywhere. And it wasn't that I was everywhere. It was just that the engine had functioned. I had this book, I was doing speaking, I was on CTV all the time. I was everywhere. I was in the newspapers. And so that feeling, but it was all just kind of like one thing at a time. And it wasn't all at once. It was this happens and then this happens. And you just layer it on. And then the engine's running. And it just kind of creates this feeling of people in that audience that like, oh my goodness, like you're the solution because I see you all the time.
Right, you're the solution. Yeah, I'm gonna flag that. People see somebody's book and they ask themselves, well, who really wrote that? There's this idea of ghostwriter. There's all these different approaches there. What's that process like when someone has come to you deciding on who really should write this?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I first started book launchers, I was adamant that everybody write their own book because I believe in the process of writing the book for yourself. That said, I had some very smart clients through the process that said, look, like this is not the best use of my time. Get me a writer. And I heard that enough that I finally said, okay, the best use of my time. Smart people who've had success, they realize the resource they never get back is time. Like that's gone. So they're the smart ones that go, hey, look, like me spending 500 hours trying to type this book out is not a good use of my time when I could spend 40 talking to a writer and the writer can write it much faster. So it really does depend on your desire, your time, your energy. And again, what is the best use of your time? And actually, interestingly, I've written my first 3 books myself, and I'm working on a 4th book. I'm 3/4 of the way through it. And it's taking way too long because I'm super busy with the company. I've got a 5-year-old son that I love to spend time with. I try to stay fit. And I finally just said to my team, look, like I am our ideal client who can't handle this. Like I need a writer. And so I've just turned it over to a writer. But the thing is, there's still pain. And that's what I always tell people, like this is still a painful process because there is no content that exists without you in our process anyways. Some ghostwriters that write celebrity stuff, they go spend 4 days with the celebrity, they go off research the rest of the book, and then the book magically appears. That's not what we do. What we do is extracting your expertise. And that's honestly, the hard part is extracting the expertise. So it's still going to be your book. It's still going to be in your voice. But it's just a matter of who's spending the time in front of the keyboard. And if you're busy, that time is precious.
Yeah. And I imagine in 2022, without getting too much into the details, but whether it's you or it's a ghostwriter, like people are thinking, oh, I'm writing themselves off as an author because they're a bad typer. Like those days are gone. There's ways around that too. I imagine there's significant use of technology in all of this these days.
Yeah. We have a dyslexic, ADHD. We have somebody who actually was legally blind who's written a book. There is no excuse.
Right.
Really, ultimately, there's no excuse because there's enough technology, tools, and software that make everything accessible, that there is a way for you to write a book.
Yeah. Writing a book, a nonfiction book that isn't boring. Let's track back to that for a second. What's the difference between a really useful book and a useful book that captures my attention while I'm reading it?
Yeah, there's lots of elements to that. One of the fundamental things, though, is that you're writing it for the reader, and a lot of people fall down because people go, "Oh my goodness, you need to write a book," whether it's your story or the expertise that you have. People hear this so often, "You need to write a book," that they forget that the book might be about them, but it's not for them. And so, one of the tests I always give, I look at a book when I get a manuscript, and I see how many chapters start with I see how many paragraphs start with I. And the reality is that, some of your story is going to be shared and you are going to write from the first person. But more than anything, you need to be thinking about this from the reader's perspective and put it in a way that puts the reader into this story. And using story, even with nonfiction, we've had some very technical books and we put story in them, and we put other kind of writing techniques like shorter sentences, not using giant words just to sound smart.
Yeah.
Again, it's simple things, but when they all come together, it creates a book that is easier to read and then ideally even engaging to read.
Sentences that start with I, that is actually a great social skills tool as well. When you're listening at your next party, the person whose sentences all start with the word I tends to be a bit self-absorbed. So there's this bringing the reader into this journey. This is not come listen to me talk about me. It's a very similar
and
life skill.
It's a good example of the social, because if you think about it, like think about the people you look forward to hanging around, and they usually go, "Oh my goodness, have you ever had this happen?" Versus the person who goes, "I was at the grocery store and I saw this and this," and it can be the exact same story, but I'm bringing you into it by saying, "Oh my goodness, have you ever been at the grocery store and been like picked the wrong line?" Like whatever it is, I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah.
It's all in the presentation and it's the same material, but somebody's like trying to bring you into it versus the person's like, "I'm going to download my world onto you."
Yeah. Actually, that's really tied in for the listeners who understand the world of leadership and executive coaching too, is taking a sentence and putting a question mark on it literally brings the person in. And we are not here to give advice. We are here to explore, helping people find solutions to their own challenges, aspirations, opportunities. This idea of curiosity, speaking from a curiosity standpoint, here is how can I share these experiences, these things that I'm thinking about that have become my unique signature presence, but bringing in the reader with that curiosity, getting them to think while they're reading about what the heck does this have to do with me, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Building a book, building a business around a book versus writing a book to promote your business. There's sort of a chicken and the egg there. What have you seen? I imagine it's one of these, there's no right answer, but what is that line that we talked about bring up for you? Which comes first?
Again, you're right, there is no right answer. I've had clients do it either way. The ones that have the most success are the ones that in either case, because it's not a given, right? Just because you have a business doesn't mean you actually know who your audience is. But in either case, it's that person who truly knows who their audience is and where they want the book to take them in their business. Where people do flounder a little bit in either scenario is when either they still think their audience is everyone, and if you think your audience is everyone, you're going to appeal to no one. So it's really, really important that you hone that in and get it as tight as you possibly can. And then the second piece of that is knowing where you want it to go, because some people think, a perfect example is bestseller, because this is one everybody wants to be a bestseller, but that's not a destination. That's a one stop, like that's one tiny little stop that really doesn't do anything as far as a business goal for you. It feels good for a moment, right? It's that dopamine hit, like, woohoo, I got the bestseller. But in the long run of your book journey, there's things that are far more important to actually grow a business. So if you're focused on, hey, I want this to get in the hands of my ideal client, or if you want it speaking engagements, I want it to get in hands of the people who are going to book me and pay me for speaking gigs, then the bestseller is something that might be fun along the way. But your journey is this, okay, I'm getting it in the hands of these people. And that's what you're focused on.
Yeah. My goal might be, I would love 5 great organizations to hire me this year.
Yep.
That has nothing to do with being a bestseller. It's that it really resonated for the audience. for whom I serve, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of people, and I emphasize this more and more now, because a lot of people, almost everybody can get bestseller status, by the way, especially on Amazon, because it doesn't take that many books if you're in the right category. Like a day of 25 sales will often hit a bestseller in a sub category for
Oh,
Amazon.
wow.
So it's not that, like, I mean, not to take it away from the people who've done it, but it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
And so that's why we tend to not even focus on it. We're like, let's focus on the bigger picture and following the steps that it takes to launch a book. You're probably going to hit that multiple times throughout your journey, but let's focus on getting the actual ROI, which is that business outcome that you want from your book.
And that's actually again, a small detail, but one that people are curious about. Best-selling author. I'm hearing you say that requires that on a given day or a given cycle, you sold X number of books. It's not yeah. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Just the details behind that?
Yeah, you could break the whole thing down into like the game that it is. My first book went to #1 on Amazon in Canada. So #1 overall, ahead of Dan Brown, ahead of Game of Thrones.
Wow.
Sold thousands and thousands of copies in a week period for that to happen.
Wow.
I still didn't make a bestseller list, like a newspaper list.
Okay.
And like Globe and Mail, I don't know why I didn't make the Globe and Mail. I think I should have numerically, but they don't necessarily count Amazon all the time. So that's probably why I didn't make that list. It's a game. And I always tell people, like, I was #1 and Oprah didn't call. I didn't dance with Ellen. Like, life went on.
Right.
It was fun. I'm proud of it. But, it really wasn't that big of a thing. So every list has their game and their nuance. And there really isn't a true bestseller. Like New York Times, which a lot of people like get really excited about, it's an editorial list. It's curated. So even if you sold the most books, if the editors decide, hey, you weren't published with the right publisher, you lean a little bit the wrong way politically, there's like all these things that they'll determine whether you actually get on the list or not. So there's a lot of authors who outsell the people on the New York Times bestselling list who will never, ever be on that list. Amazon is based on an hourly update. So and this is why a lot of people game the system with Amazon. Amazon's gotten more against that. But that's why I said in a sub category, you can sell 25 books and get that orange bestseller flag. Amazon puts so much weight on that Amazon bestseller flag, they won't let you put Amazon bestseller on your description or on your book cover. They will remove it. And that even goes for me, who I was legitimately an Amazon #1 overall bestselling book. I can't put Amazon bestseller anywhere on my Amazon description.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, great for lots of reasons. It almost sounds like it's the extrinsic motivator. It's the social media likes. It's ticking that box of some sort of gratification that you've attained something. But really, what is it that as the author you're trying to do with this book?
Exactly. I mean, we have lots of clients who are selling a ton of books in the corporate world, and they're thrilled, and they've never seen a list. I mean, most of them have hit have gotten at least one of those orange Amazon bestseller flags, but they're selling thousands of books that don't count anywhere, but they're massively successful. And so you got to choose what's most important to you. And some people love to play the game. And it is a game. The bestseller list thing is a game. And if you want to play it, that's great. Know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's fair. But I think a lot of people play it without realizing A, they're playing a game, or B, what it's like, why are you playing it?
Yeah. Hey, Julie, if we could kind of move towards a wrap, now that we've explored the nuts and bolts of all this, back to your full service book launchers.
Yeah.
Most of us, if I have a clear understanding, there's a listener out there with a clear understanding as well, from intake, we're the right fit, this is happening. What does that full service mean after the book's been written? Just tell us a little bit about where that relationship would go in a perfect scenario.
Yeah. So after the first draft, whether you've worked with a writer or a writing coach, we put it through 3 different kinds of editing. So content edit, copy edit, and a proofread. While that's happening, you start meeting with our book marketing team and you start going through the different launch strategies. We start doing keyword category pricing research. We start doing influencer research so that we've got a really solid launch plan as well as a post-launch marketing plan. We call it the roadmap. And so we're building out who we're going to be pitching you to, how to get reviews, places that we might be marketing you to for ebook sales, all those kind of things. What do you want as far as your bestseller goals? Like if that is a goal, we're going to direct you one way versus if your goal is, I want, bookstore distribution, or I want to be doing speaking. So we kind of have a path for each goal, and we plan that out while you're in editing. And then we do cover design and layout, and then we set up all the distribution accounts, and then we move into marketing. And there's 2 phases of marketing. There's the pre-launch marketing. Your book is available for sale. People can buy it, but they don't actually get the copy yet. And then there's the post-launch marketing, which is when the book is out and people are getting it, 24 hours or picking it up at the store. But every month we have different things that we're doing in terms of pitching, Amazon ads, bookstore distribution, library distribution, book awards, to just build momentum and keep building momentum month after month, so that you're ultimately directed towards wherever you want to go with your book.
Wow. I'm so impressed by the layers to which you've thought about these things. And if I compare that to this idea that I'm just going to start writing and figure it out when it's done. I mean, this is just, it's like playing 2 different sports here. This is very, very helpful. If someone is listening and they think I need this right now, where would they find you, Julie?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to go to booklaunchers.com, 7 steps, which the number 7 steps. And that's a download on the 7 steps to get started. That is, figuring out who's your audience, what's your goal, and helping you create an outline so that you're setting your book up to sell. And then you can hit reply to any of those emails that you get after you sign up for that, and that will go straight to me.
Right on. Well, you'll probably see mine come through. What a great exercise. Even that 7 steps, my gosh, as a first step in refining a business, refining an audience, refining a message. It's just so applicable to every piece of content one were to write. I think it's fascinating. Speaking of where to find people, I have been told I don't ask this enough. If you've enjoyed this episode or any other episode, please rate it, review it anywhere that you get this podcast. It is allowing me to reach people like Julie that can provide value to you. So I thank the listeners very much. And Julie, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.